Chapter 61 Secrets. Summary. The strange group of aliens seem okay, but Kotsky thinks they're hiding something. The campfire flickered as Kotsky added another scrap of plywood. He narrowed his eyes at the aliens, casually leaned up against their ship, as they watched him and the fire cautiously. He didn't trust them. There was something off about the way they looked at them, a knowing caution in their stares, something practiced in their nonchalant slouch, something deadly in the hidden pockets in their clothes. Kotsky didn't like it, didn't trust it, but it really did seem like they needed help. Whatever life the extras had led for them to act that way doesn't mean they didn't need help. From what he'd seen of the ship, it really was banged up. He couldn't tell from what. That was the nerd and gremlins area, but it looked pretty fucked. Still, Kotsky felt like they knew something. He turned back to the fire. Everyone's caution seemed to have disappeared after not immediately being attacked. Kotsky scoffed. They always needed to be on guard. They couldn't afford to be taken by surprise again. The flames steadily grew, as did the rigidness of some of the aliens. He felt his lips tick up in a smirk. Were they afraid of fire? The four of them did seem a little weirded out when they decided to cook some dinner outside. Kotsky never would have decided this on his own, but Denki and Mina wouldn't stop whining about food, and Deku seemed to think it would help with bonding. Why he wanted to talk to these alien freak shows was beyond him. They should go as soon as the ship is repaired. But it wasn't up to Kotsky. He kept getting outvoted and called grumpy. He just wanted to keep everyone safe. He couldn't do that if they were being idiots. Still, he'd stay vigilant and ready. He tucked the knowledge that all the aliens but the eight-limbed bitch were afraid of fire away greedily. If it came to it, he would be able to protect his friends. Deku and Mei were working with a weird glowing alien to fix whatever was wrong with their ship. Despite how much Kotsky didn't want to let anyone out of his sight, especially to go off gallivanting with one of the suspicious aliens, at least there were two of them. Deku had his quirk, and even he would admit Mei was terrifying with a gun. With them combined, he was more likely to have to console them over killing someone rather than worry about them being hurt. With those two off doing nerd things with one alien, it left the rest of them to deal with the other three. The green, shiny one was definitely the leader. It didn't escape his notice how the others looked to her for reassurance every few minutes. She didn't seem very dangerous, but her skin looked diamond tough, and there was an unmistakable intelligence in her eyes. The green bitch was off to the side, on her own, while the other two were chatting with Mina and Denki. Ochako had gone back to the ship to see if Pyerpa and Fastel wanted to play around in the low gravity with her. She moved through the weird gravity with practiced ease, thanks to her quirk. Kotsky once again had to ignore the urge to not let them out of his sight. "So, what are you guys doing here?" Mina asked the purple eight-armed alien. "Yeah, how'd your ship get damaged?" Denki added, lounging in the air, arms behind his head as he floated down. The pair visibly tensed. If that wasn't suspicious, he didn't know what was. "You know how things are," the stick one said. "Not really," Denki replied. He better not be about to say what Kotsky thinks he's about to say. "We're pretty new to this whole space thing." Kotsky resisted the urge to facepalm. The eight-limbed one chuckled. "You sure are an odd group." "You could say that again," the leader alien muttered quietly, clearly not meaning for anyone to hear. But Kotsky heard. If they were that bad at whispering, he might yet find out what they were hiding. But for now, they fell back into silence. Katsuki went back to preparing for dinner, the strangers never leaving his attention. It was going to be a long few hours while the nerd and gremlin fixed the ship. "And I think that's it," Izuku said, emerging from around the back of the ship, wiping the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand. "Everything's all fixed up. Mei is just double-checking the readings with Gaxlix." His hands were stretched out in front of him as he massaged them, once again cursing his chronic pain. It seemed that the wind had died down, and everyone was gathered near the front of the ship. Katsuki was tending to a low, crackling fire, over which he was cooking some sort of mushroom-like plants. Mina and Dinky were chatting up the mauve, eight-limbed sentient, Movokto, Gaxlix had said their name was, who seemed quite engaged in the topic. The tall, pink-haired sentient, Blinku, was over by the green reflective sentient, Sokka. Ochako and the siblings were lying down, panting, huge grins on their faces. Izuku smiled. He couldn't get over the pleasant hum in his chest from being able to help people again. It was in Izuku's very soul to help people, so being on the receiving side of that help from Ayalin and Mr. Xiantuk had been odd. Not bad, but odd. Still, he had to tamp down on the urge to bounce with joy, lest he drift away. Katsuki stood up from the fire, stretching out his back. "Good, 'cause dinner's done." Mina popped up, and when she stopped floating awkwardly, walked over. "Nice! I am so hungry." She plopped down on the rocky ground. "What is it?" "The first thing I found that wouldn't fucking kill the extras." Mina and the sentients looked at the leather-looking lump apprehensively. To be fair, Izuku didn't think it was the most appealing thing either. He's sure it tasted great, given it was Kacchan who cooked it, but still. Dinky walked over. "I don't care if it's a boot. I'm starving." Katsuki scoffed and thrusted a serving into his hands. "You're the one who insisted on food." "And I will enjoy my delicious boot," Dinky smirked, taking a huge bite. He let out a pleased hum. Katsuki looked up at everyone else. "The rest of you gonna eat?" Izuku walked over, hungry despite the slightly off-putting appearance. "Thanks, Kacchan," he chirped, taking a mushroom skewer and sitting down. The rest followed, gathering around the fire, some sitting quite a bit further away than others. He noticed Movokto shuffle closer to the fire, warming her 4 hands. "I love fire," she said wistfully, watching the flames dance. Izuku chuckled. After spending so much time around Mei and her explosions catching things on fire, I have to agree. Movokto flopped forward onto her stomach, a little awkward with her 4 legs, and stared up at the fire. "The others never let me play with fire. Apparently, it's completely terrifying and unreasonably dangerous." She pouted squeakily. "What?" Mina questioned, looking over at Plinku, who was oddly far away from the fire. "You guys never feel like setting things on fire and watching them burn down?" Plinku gave Mina a disgusted look, brushing a thick tendril of pink hair out of his face. "We're not insane." Mina shrugged. "You do you, boo. Anyway, how'd your ship get damaged again? You never really answered." "Oh yeah, was it space debris or something?" Dinky asked. "Wait," Sokka said, pushing off from where she'd been leaning against the ship. "You guys seriously don't know what we are?" Izuku looked over at the others, sharing a confused look before turning to the green sentient. "No? Should we?" he asked. "How do you not know?" Vokto gaped, tearing her attention away from the fire. "We weren't really hiding it." Katsuki glared at the mauve sentient from where he was crouched near the fire. Hiding what? He snapped. Calm down, Sokka placated. It's nothing bad. Well, most might think it's bad, but I promise, we're not bad. Izuku saw Kacchan tense, and the others gave the sentients wary looks. Ochako scooted subtly in front of Pyarpa and Fastel. Izuku could feel One for All prickling under his skin, but he pushed down the response. Nothing bad had happened yet. He didn't know why, but he trusted what Sokka was saying. Maybe they were Death Wielders. What could be something they should recognize that most people would be thinking they were bad without giving a second thought? Though I guess it makes sense that you didn't know, Sokka continued cautiously. Most people wouldn't help Parachi like us. The sentients braced at the word, but the teens just stared blankly. Izuku glanced at the siblings, but they looked pretty confused. Like the people who download movies without paying? Pyarpa questioned. Were they talking about pirates? Sokka sighed. Not the type that does internet crimes, kid. You guys really know nothing about things out here, do you? A different type of pirate. Were they talking about... Were they space pirates? Like swashbuckling sailors who traverse the stars robbing ships? That was a real thing? Pirates back on Earth died out long before quirks came into play, so a lot of the history was lost to time, but Izuku remembered a video he'd watched about pirates. They could be brutal and often killed people, but they also offered a weird sense of vigilante justice. And it sounded like these people were space pirates. He hoped they leaned more on the vigilante justice side than the hang-you-by-your-own-intestines side. Either way, they didn't seem ready to attack and rob them. As of now, they seemed more afraid of the teens attacking them. Still, Izuku was a little more on guard than before. As well as more than a little curious. You guys are space pirates? Dinky gaped, his expression starstruck. That is so cool! Mina exclaimed. Ochako leaned forward. Have you pulled off any heists? Her eyes, much like Dinky, lit up at the idea. The group of three seemed taken aback at the excitement. Yeah, Izuku felt a little tension drain out of him. They seemed pretty harmless right now. They were just a group of people who had needed help. So, while Izuku stayed on guard, he let his own excitement take over. What is it like being a space pirate? What do space pirates do? How did you come into this profession? Have you ever hung anyone by their intestines? He began questioning intently before Movokto cut him off. Slow down, kid, she said. One question at a time. Izuku nodded. What does it mean to be a space pirate? You kids really don't know anything, do you? Sokka mused. Well, every pirate crew operates slightly differently, but the guild sets certain rules. We focus mostly on raiding federal ships and intercepting sentient trafficking shipments. It's what we're best at. Izuku felt himself tense at the mention of traffickers, but they said they fight back against them. He wasn't sure how he felt about stealing from the space government, but it lined up with what most pirates did in the West, only going for government ships and leaving the little guys alone. The closest modern thing Izuku could compare them to were vigilantes, and considering there was definitely a part of Izuku that had considered becoming a vigilante if he couldn't be a hero, he couldn't judge them too hard. Guild? Kacchan questioned from by the fire, still noticeably tensed. There's a whole gang of you fuckers out there. Yep, Mavokto chirped. They have a whole network of ships, though most crews act largely independently, like us. They tell us about any assignments in our quadrant, and we choose if we want to take them. Though, we do have to hand over a portion of our haul to the guild so it can afford to stay running, and buy resources for the members. Plus, if we ever need backup, we can get help, despite being on the other side of the law. We were actually trying to call another guild ship for help before you guys showed up first. Izuku's brain was running 1,000,000 miles a minute. A group that didn't care about the letter of the law and fought against trafficking. One that offered aid and resources to their members. Was it a sign of insanity he was even considering asking this? Maybe, but they needed all the advantages they could get. As long as they weren't hurting people, who cared if they found themselves even more on the bad side of the space government? It's not like they had to rob government ships. Anyway, Izuku's sure that they had already broken dozens of laws without knowing. Spaceship insurance was probably a thing, and he knew for certain they didn't have that. Plus, they definitely hadn't paid their taxes. What was vigilante justice compared to a little tax evasion? So, Izuku said hesitantly, what do you think it would take for us to become space pirates?